Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we have a brand new knife company to take a look at, and we're going to start with a budget offering. And what we have here is the Remet Handfeel. Now, before I go any further into this review, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you like what you see, please do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, follow along, and I will continue to bring you the content. Now, let's take a look at some overall specs on this knife right here. We have an overall length of 7.48 inches with a blade length coming in at 3.15 inches and a blade thickness at your standard 120 thousandths. Blade material on this guy is 9CR18 MOV, which should be nothing new to anyone. That's what you see on a lot of Sen cuts. So it's a pretty well-known steel. Nothing super crazy special, but you know, a decent budget steel. It's a nice stainless steel that seems to be pretty decent with the whole edge sharpening, edge retention. Again, it doesn't really accelerate in anything, but it is an overall decent budget steel. Drop point blade style with a flat grind, a handle length coming in at 4.33 inches, and a handle thickness at 510 thousandths. Handle material on this is G10 with a liner lock. And we are looking at a user of a right hand only tip-up carry. I'm always surprised when I see the right hand only budget knives. I feel like budget knives should always be for righties and lefties, especially when you're looking at a price of $39.80. There could be a lot of people that want to buy this for the price. So I think for the price, I think it would be nice to get a little lefty love here. And the weight, we're looking at 3.52 ounces. Let's take a look at some size comparisons and see how it stacks up against some other little better well-known knives. Oh, I dropped it. Darn it. That's the Civivi Elementum you heard there. As you can see, not quite the same length as the Handfeel, but we have the Kizer Gemini, which is a little closer, still actually shorter. Let's see if we have something else that lines up a little better with this guy here. Let's bring out the Vosteed Raccoon, and I think that'll give us a better lineup. There we go. There's the Raccoon. That measures up pretty well. And one more here. Let's take a look at the Kizer. Wow. How'd this escape me? The Kizer T1. Geez, ow. It has been a day. It's been a week, actually. It has been a week. But there we go. A little better in the length department. And really a lot of similarities in the handle between the Raccoon and the Handfeel. You have a little more of a curve there, which we'll talk about when we get to the ergos, because that does factor in and play a little bit of an effect there. But first, let's talk about this blade. There's really nothing crazy special about this blade. It's a simple, good old drop point blade with a pretty nice grind. It's decent, rather average, 21 to 22 thousandths behind the edge, and again with 120 thousandths thick blade stock. Pretty average performer. Doesn't smoke the competition, but it'll hang in there. And of course, I think for most people's EDC needs perform just fine. A couple things that are worth pointing out on this, to where, when I talk about a knife like this, we're talking a budget knife in the $40-ish range. So you guys know I've said this before, but I don't compare this to $100 knives. I don't compare this to anything other than what it is. So when I'm talking about this knife, I'm comparing it mostly to Sen cuts. This is a Sen cut competition. It's not even a Civivi competition. I mean, it is, but Civivi and Kizer are more up there in that, in that $70 to $100 range or $60 to $100 range. You get down into $40, you can't expect to get the same stuff you're getting from Kizer and Civivi. But you should expect to get Sen cut quality. So how does this compare with a Sen cut model? Pretty good. But again, a couple things I'd like to point out on this one. The thumb studs. While there's really nothing wrong with them at first glance, one of the things that I'm noticing as I handle this is the stair stepping on the thumb studs here. There's a little higher stair stepping from notch to notch, and you feel that, and you especially feel it towards the end of the thumb stud. The top of this thumb stud, it feels a little skinnier than other thumb studs. Now that might sound crazy, but let me explain to you what I mean by that. Let me bring back out the Vosteed Raccoon, which is a $59 knife. So we're not a lot more expensive, But as you can see how the stair stepping is a lot more minimal, and the overall thickness of these thumb studs is pretty much identical. The difference is in the stair stepping of the jimping towards the end of the thumb stud. Now, you don't obviously feel it that much on the Raccoon because it's just, it's a lot more uniform. It almost feels rounded. Or you get into something like the Sencut Sash. It's completely rounded. This feels really good. You don't feel any real, hot spots or wear spots on your thumb. Now, I'm not calling this a hot spot because I've carried this knife for a few days now and I've deployed it a lot. I definitely by no means think it's a hot spot, but I definitely feel it. I feel a little bit more skinniness up there on the thumb stud. And when there's so many good $40 knives out there, those are the little details. That's what separates, the best from the rest. And just because this may be part of the rest from a thumb stud aspect doesn't mean it's still not a good knife, but it's a difference you need to know. And it's one of the reasons I review knives, to tell you guys those little differences. So while I don't hate the thumb studs, I do notice that. And I would like to see that, looked at in the future when they're going to make new models. Maybe bring that stair stepping on the jimping of the thumb studs down a little bit, so there's not such a big difference, because that does make a difference in the feel when you're going to deploy it. Now this flipper back here, when I first got this, I thought for sure this flipper was going to be a hot spot. This looked really pointy. It looked like it was going to annoy my finger, and it's really not that bad. It's not the best flipper in the world, but it's very effective. It works. The jimping's good, and they rounded this off enough to where I don't really feel a hot spot. I don't really feel any more of an agitation point. I can push button this, and it doesn't hurt my finger because the detent is very nice on this guy. We'll talk about that when we get to the action. Moving into the handle, though, the handle is rather basic. In terms of the actual ergos itself, it feels pretty good. There's just enough jimping up here on the spine to where it is functional. You can use it and it'll actually be very effective. And then in terms of the rest of the handle, there's a nice amount of texturing on the G10 to where it's not too much, and it's enough to where you just get a little bit of that grip and bite to where it does work. I do think the inner lines on this handle, I think some people are going to love them and some people are not going to love them. And that comes down to the size of your hand. For me, as I'm squeezing down on this, I can barely get my middle finger and ring finger in between this little loop here, which is really where they're meant to go. But when I'm just kind of generally holding it, if I'm not trying, I do find that my ring finger kind of rests right here on this, I don't want to call it a point, but kind of this hump. And again, it's not ideal, but it doesn't really bother me. Some people, again, there's some people that are much harsher critics. So some people are going to really like that depending on the size of their hand, and some people are not going to like that. I'm very much in the middle. I don't really care one way or the other because it doesn't annoy me. It doesn't bother me, but I do think it's worth putting out there that you will feel that the curves in this handle, it's not to where like the Raccoon right here, where there's obviously that one curve like the top portion, and then it just kind of goes straight as to where you have this. I do think this is a safer route. I think this feels better on a lot of other hands, and I think it would benefit a knife like this to maybe not have that second curve, or maybe minimize it to where it's very, very mild. Even as is, it's not really exaggerated, but again, it's another little small detail that I notice. Back here on the clip, the clip is okay. I never like to see a lot of font on the clip. You guys know that. I'm just going to kind of let that go. But these clip screws back here, these were interesting because T8 pivot, T6 hardware, but the T6 screws in here, I cannot confirm this yet because I don't have a T7, but if this is not a T7 in here, it's a very wide T6. So my bits fit just fine in all of the body screws. They're definitely solid T6s, but the screws, they might be T7s. And if they're not T7s, they're wide T6s, and that's not a good thing. Again, it's not a huge problem because all you got to do is just take a little bit of like paper towel or napkin and put it at the end of your tip, and you can use it to back it out completely safe without stripping the bit. The problem is you have to remember that. And this is not the first knife to have that problem. I've had this problem on other little budget knives in the past, but it's been a while since I've had that problem. So I wanted to point that out too, because again, you got to really get into the nitty gritty when you're comparing good knives at affordable prices. But the screws back here, like I said, they do work. They're just a wide T6. So maybe I just got one that had some off-spec screws. That could be. There could always be some lemons when it comes to little, cheap hardware like that. But I thought that was worth noting as well. Now going into the action on this guy, the action is really good. The action is every bit as good as a Sencut, and I truly mean that. Detent is about as perfect as it can be for a flipper and a thumb stud knife, because you want to have a flipper with a strong enough detent to really get that good snappy action, whether you're flipping it or using the thumb studs. And then of course the middle finger action has to be good enough to middle finger flick it without getting caught up and having to really fight through that detent. You don't have that here. Very smooth action, very easy to close, very, very nice in the action department. No complaints there whatsoever in the action department. So where are we left with here with this brand new Remet hand feel knife? I think it's pretty good. I think there's definitely some improvements that can be made. Maybe a little refinement in the thumb studs and the flipper. Look a little harder at those screws back there. But at the end of the day, I don't have enough complaints or gripes with it to say no on it. This would still be a yes for me. If you like the looks of this knife. I really do like the blade. I like the symmetry of the blade. I like the blade to handle ratio. There's some pretty good things about this, but the problem with any new knife company right now, whether it be Remet or anybody else, is they're coming out into some really, really stiff competition right now. There's a lot of great things going on in the knife industry, and if you want to be a part of it, if you want to compete, you really got to hit on everything. And I think Remet hit on a lot, but I think there's a couple parts that can really be improved on this. And I really hope they make the improvements because they're off to a really good start. This is not a negative review. There's a lot of good things about this knife. And for $39.80, it's not a bad buy. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think of this, the Remet hand feel. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And until the next one, I'm out.